Hello and welcome to this course, and in this course we're going to be asking the question, are we living in a simulated reality? Now, it's going to be a very interesting, quite a niche philosophical course that we're going to look at here, and it's actually quite a lot to talk about in these few lessons, but in this we're just going to take a little introduction, really what we mean, and really outline what we're going to be doing in these next few lessons. So we're going to take an introduction to the idea of simulated realities, and we're going to recap on the idea of simulated realities from a previous course. You don't have to have watched the previous course because we only touched on it very briefly. Everything that we covered in the previous course is going to be covered in more detail in this one, seeing as it was only a few slides at the end of the course. And then we're going to look at the outline and the content of this course. So really the central question that we're asking is, does reality exist? And that seems to be quite a daunting task to try and find some kind of answer to this question, but we can really look at linking the questions together. So we've got, does reality exist? And if it doesn't, does that mean we're living in a computer simulation? Or we could just ask these questions in isolation. If we were living in a computer simulation, how would we know? That's another interesting question that we have to really work out. Can we ever know if anything is real or not? If we're real or not? If anybody else is real or not? Now, this is a very, very, very old philosophical question, and these questions date back to Plato and Descartes, and further and further back. So really, we're asking questions that aren't new questions here, but we're applying quite contemporary philosophy by looking at the idea of us being a part of a computer simulation. So yeah, these are the questions we're going to look at in this course. We're going to look at how we're going to answer these questions and what arguments we can find for and against any of the propositions that we have stated here. So the idea of the simulated reality is a thesis that reality could be simulated. It's very simple. It's as simple as that. So could we possibly be living in a reality that is simulated? Is this all just virtual reality? So really there's a lot of philosophical debate on this topic, because it fundamentally is a question that can't be expressly decided one way or the other. Ultimately, this kind of debate traces its roots back to Plato in his Republic, looking at things like the allegory of the cave, and you've also got Descartes' Meditations, where he uses what he called the methodological skepticism, which was a sort of a way in which he try to work out what he can know is real for sure. Okay, so he went further and further back and traced it all the way back to basically coming to the conclusion that the only thing he can know for sure is real and exists is him, because he thinks about these things, and to think requires a thinker. Therefore I think, therefore I am. This is the famous quote that he outlined. In this course, we're going to be looking at the more contemporary philosophy on this topic. We're not going to be touching very much on Plato and Descartes and very old philosophy, because I feel like that's been more of covered ground. If you want a course on the older epistemological subject of reality when it comes to Plato, and then looking at how Descartes uses his methodological skepticism, that's perfectly fine. But in this course, we're not going to be really touching on that a lot. We're going to be touching on the proper up-to-date philosophy on this, and looking at the idea of computer simulations and whether or not we're a part of them. So as an outline, what we're going to do is we're going to look at the following philosophical issues. We're going to look at first the main thesis for this entire question, are we living in a simulated reality, which is the simulation argument. And then we're going to look at the idea of the mind as a computer, so the computational argument, or the computational theory of mind. We're going to take a little sort of a brief discussion on seeing the mind as a computer. We're going to look at the dreaming argument, which is a very interesting one. We're going to then get into a little bit of a tangent by looking at the philosophy of dreams. Okay, and we're going to be drawing upon our knowledge of the film Inception as well, to try and work out some of the interesting philosophical conundrums that come from analysing dreams and the philosophy of dreams and what it means to dream. And then we're going to really conclude the whole thing by asking, how do we know we're living in a simulated reality? And we're going to be using evidence and knowledge from all of the previous lessons and really trying to find some kind of conclusion, because you could then come to the end of this course realising that maybe we are living in a computer simulation, or maybe it's definitely the case that we're not. So specifically in the next lesson we're going to look at the simulation argument. Feel free to add any questions and discussions in the discussion section below. I'm all for having a discussion, answering any questions that you might want to ask, getting a little debate going, we're trying to work out whether or not we're living in a computer simulation. So it's a very interesting thing that we can start to discuss in the discussion section below. So all these things you can do down below.